We are live. Welcome. This is Beau Richards, and I'm your host of the Beyond Red and Blue podcast. And with me is my co-host Dan Humphrey.
What's up?
So we tried, everybody. We seriously tried to go without actually talking about the presidential debates. We thought, why would you want to talk about them? And then we reasoned that we have a podcast that is about politics to try and make them not political. So we kind of have to talk about a political debate. So today is going to be that discussion. We will be discussing the political debates, and it will be terrible because they were a fucking shit show.
Absolutely.
Jesus fuck.
Just ridiculous.
Yeah. So I'll start with you. Kind of give me your impressions. Give me your highlights.
There's no highlights. It's all lowlights. If I'm being perfectly honest, and I'd like to be transparent, I didn't even make it through the whole thing. I didn't watch the highlights and stuff, but it was incredibly obvious very soon into that, whatever you want to call it. It was not a debate. That there was no substance to be had. It was just a big dick swinging contest, and it was shameful on behalf of America, on behalf of anyone who calls himself a leader, on behalf of what politics should be, on behalf of grown-ups at just about every level. It was just sad.
Yes. I would add Americans to that list too.
Yeah.
Because we collectively made this happen. Like, these two were elected by the people. Now, we could make an argument, let's say, that there was a little bit of finagling that caused these two, among other people, to be put in this position. But we, I think, collectively as a country, created this debacle.
I would say I would agree with that at the point of I think we get what we deserve. And what I mean by that is these two candidates, as terrible as they are really just symptoms of the problem. They're not, Trump is not the problem. Biden's not the problem. They are symptoms of the problem of the hijacking of our political system by, special interest groups, lobbyists, people with money, things like that. And the way they've been able to influence politics gives us a Trump. It produces a Biden. So as Americans, and don't get me wrong, it's, everybody has stuff to do. They can't spend 24/7 thinking about politics, but it's pretty easy not to worry about it and just assume that adults are running things and it's going to be fine. And lo and behold, there have been shenanigans behind the scenes for quite a while now, and the whole apparatus has rotten from the inside.
What's that saying about assuming it makes an ass out of you and me?
That's right.
Yeah. So one thing I find interesting, I'll start with this just because you were talking about the behind the scenes hijacking of the political party. Biden was actually very vocal about this at the beginning of I forget, probably like 7 minutes in. The first like 2 minutes were the moderator talking. So maybe it was even before then, but he made this statement, "I am the Democratic Party." And I'm not entirely, I think it was less an assertion of his like power in terms of what we're talking about the hijacking behind the scenes of the political system. I think it was more an assertion of, Trump saying that he's a puppet for radical left-wingers. So he was like, "That's not true. I am the He didn't say it this way, but his response would then be, "I am the Democratic Party, so you're wrong," basically. But to what you said about behind the scenes hijacking, I thought it was funny that he decided to declare that he is not being puppeted by Bernie and Kamala and AOC and Hillary and whoever.
I don't think any of those people are puppeting him because none of those people are writing checks.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, who's the donors? Who's writing checks?
Yep.
Who has business interests? And what laws do they need passed?
Yeah. So Trump was very civil for the first 7 minutes of the debate, which is the time it took for the moderator to introduce himself, both the candidates, lay out the rules, ask the question, and then I think let Biden finish. Because Trump went first, and then he had his talk, and then Biden talked, and then Trump didn't really interrupt him, and then everything went downhill. I also think too, like, as I don't know if the two were fatigued, knowing now that it's possible Trump had COVID during the debate. It's possible he was fatigued, but
Sure.
as the questions were asked, their answers just got worse and less. Like they seemed to get more nonsensical and have less substance. Um, and the reason I think that is because, in part, is because they talked over each other more as it went on. But that could have just been too because of tension and stress and like they're combative. But like the answer to the first question that was asked, they had different answers that weren't antithesis, right? So they each had different answers to the question that didn't directly contradict each other.
Okay.
Pretty much all the other questions, one of them would say something and the other one would basically say that person was wrong and that they were right. And so part of that was by design. A lot of the questions were like, why are you the candidate and not the other person? So you kind of have a little bit of that. The questions were kind of bad, I thought, but I thought that could have been way better. But I did notice as it went on after watching it twice, um, because I am sadist and decided to watch the debate twice.
Thank you, sir. May I please have another?
Yeah, and so it'll balance out your partially watching it so that we've got one full watch between the two
All
of us.
right.
But it did seem that as the debate went on, that the answers became more of "You're wrong, I'm right." Suck my dick.
Nan and a boo boo.
Yeah, like, and then which was unfortunate. I had high hopes for about, like I said, about 7 minutes. Um, Actually, it's closer to 10. So I actually have a note here. 10 minutes into the debate, Trump starts to go on the offensive against the moderator as well as Joe Biden.
Oh,
So
that was
yeah,
Chris Wallace, right? He's a Fox guy.
yeah, he's like the only moderate at Fox, I think, though,
Okay.
or the only Democrat. That's right, Chris Wallace. I knew his first name was Chris, but I can remember his last name. Um, so yeah, my impressions or my highlights were that I didn't get the impression that either of them actually wanted to be there. I didn't get the impression that either of them cared about the topics being asked. I didn't get the Trump just what I expected from Trump is that he would show up, feel like he had better things to do, be divisive for the purpose of divisive for the purposes of being divisive, to like just to stir shit up and not really give any fucks and then leave, because it's kind of his mo. He's kind of always been like that since like the 80s, from what I understand. He
Yep.
just kind of like doesn't give a fuck. So in terms of performance, that's what I expected, and that's what he gave. So I haven't read any articles just because I didn't want to have a colored opinion of the debate. I kind of wanted to be all my own opinion, but about who won the debate. And I think simply because Biden lost control a little bit, I think, and Trump accomplished exactly what I feel like he wanted to. I feel like he won the debate on those grounds. Only
Yeah.
on those grounds. I want to be clear on
On
that.
those
Like,
grounds, yeah.
I don't think his purpose was to go to the debate and like wow the voters with like policy knowledge to sway people. I think he went there just to be an asshole.
Well, if they were having a contest to see who could piss farther up the rope,
Yeah.
congratulations, Trump, you did it.
Well, and like if
Like,
there's going to be a competition for that, like he's the one who's best suited. And like he went in and delivered, and like none of it shocked me. Uh, Honestly, it was hilarious because I expected it, and his insults are just ridiculous. But it like you could tell it really got to Biden, and I could be off base about both of them, but like I said, Trump just gave me the impression that he had no fucks. Part of that is because he didn't really ever look at the camera. He was only ever looking at Biden or Chris Wallace or at nothing. He would just kind of like stare off, not like vacantly, but he would talk and like you couldn't see who he was looking at.
Hmm.
Um, Biden had the opposite tactic in that he would answer Chris Wallace and stare at him for like 30 seconds or 10 or however long. And then he would directly look at one of the cameras with it and gesture with his hand towards the camera
Mhm.
in an attempt to um, address the American people.
Right.
But it was like a very obvious attempt and it felt forced and rehearsed and it it did not feel genuine to me. And I could be off base on that, but my impression, and it actually was solidified later in the debate with something that happened between the two of them. But I did it just didn't feel genuine to me. It felt like obviously he was coached and he would listen to it because I mean you have debate moderators who are going to kind of help you through the process and kind of explain to you where you should put yourself. And he's been doing this for 47 years, so he kind of knows how to talk. And you get prep, and you need it.
Mhm.
Most people need it. I don't think Trump had any. He probably didn't care, but um, I could tell that they were like, "Look, you need to address him and then address the people. Address Chris, the moderator, and then address the people. Address Trump and then address the people. But you need to bring it back to the people so that they know that you're the people's candidate." That's the impression that I got, is that he wanted to make it very, very clear that he was the people's candidate. And so he tried to look at the camera and gesture with his hands and call you from the television screen or the laptop and believe in him.
Sure.
And I didn't buy it. I just didn't buy it.
I don't
Um,
disagree with that as a strategy, and
no,
I don't even think that.
it's a good strategy. I think it could be
Yeah,
done really well. Some people are really good at it.
I think the main thing is just Trump had him shook, which
Yes.
is why he looked so awkward doing it. Um, and I'll say this with the context that I don't believe either of them any farther than I can throw them. It's just that Biden does have that experience, so he should at least be able to pretend to be a good politician. But Trump had him shook.
Yes.
Um, so he, saying whatever message that he had crafted or his team had crafted for him beforehand, that's just part of the game,
Mhm.
which is frustrating to me, but that is what it is. Um, but yeah, Trump got under his skin. So when he did try to pull it back and talk to the camera and talk to the
Yeah.
people, you could see it on his face that he was he
Yeah.
was having a tough time.
Interestingly, Biden is the first person to interrupt somebody. It wasn't Trump. About 7 minutes in, Biden interrupted Trump. I forget exactly what he said, but he interrupted him. And it was a slight interruption. Trump kept going. Biden stopped. Um, then it was before he came out and was like, I am the Democratic Party. But
Which candidates been doing that since forever,
no, they
really.
have. It was just really interesting because the whole debate, what people remember is that Trump interrupted Biden a lot because he did do it a lot and he did it a
A
lot more.
lot.
Yeah, he did it a lot. But it was just funny to me that Biden was actually the one to do that.
Right. Well, and
And
Trump even fucking mentioned that. Something to the effect of, not exactly, but something to the effect of, you started it.
yeah,
You interrupted me first.
well,
Children,
Chris
you're in
Wallace was
timeout.
like, I'm talking to you specifically, Mr. President, about letting the other person finish, and he's like, okay, but
Him too.
him too, like he's been doing some of it too, but yeah, I thought that was very interesting. Um, Trump starts to go on the offensive about 10 minutes in, and like I said, I don't think that he took any advice or listened to any advice about what to do. From what I understand, and I don't understand a lot, but what I understand, he tends to disregard the advice of his policy, like his cabinet members.
Yeah.
He kind of just tends to go off on do his own thing. Um, so I'm not sure if he intended the whole time to be very disruptive or not. Like it's hard to say because he's a disruptive individual, but I don't know if like maybe he actually was like, hey, maybe I'll answer some questions. But um, Chris Wallace uh, calls him out on something, um, and about 10 minutes in, and about Obamacare, and that's what started it.
Hmm.
Chris Wallace was basically like, he's like, you have never in these what did he say? You've never in these 4 years come up with a comprehensive plan to replace Obamacare, even though he's talked about replacing it since
Right.
he ran during his nomination.
It's a fair question.
Yeah, and so Trump, like in the middle of that question, and then towards the end when he finished, was like interrupting and was like, "No, no, no, I've done stuff." Now, to be fair, Trump's answer wasn't that he had a comprehensive plan, even though he said he did. His example was a repeal of a certain portion of Obamacare. I think it was the individual requirement, like you have to have health care coverage or you get fined. I think that's what he removed.
Mm.
Um, but he didn't actually address the claim that he doesn't have his own comprehensive plan, which I thought was interesting. And that's kind of that probably is, if anyone, what's it? Too late, don't read. None of either of the candidates had really a comprehensive plan for any of the questions that were asked. They
Yeah,
all
there was no real substance
no,
at
they
all.
all skirted over pretty much all the questions.
Yeah.
Like I said, the first question they both kind of answered. They answered in different ways, but I thought it was moderately satisfactory. And so I figured if I can go over that first question, give their answers, and just because they're both interesting. So the question is, why are you right, each candidate, about the Supreme Court pick during now, right? Because Trump, for those who are living in Iraq or in the woods, has nominated somebody to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and basically all political liberals are up in arms about it for a variety of reasons, some of which I think are probably valid, some of which it's just political crying, political
Sure.
tears. So, like, why is it correct to pick one and why is it not? Trump's claim is that, he had two real claims. He's like, well, the first one is that because we won the election. So, and he actually said this, he's like, we won the election and that has consequences. That was like the first thing out of his mouth was, we can do it because we won the election and that has consequences. And that kind of set the tone. I thought that was very interesting. But then his other reason is like, we have the right to do it. Like, later on in the back and forth, he's like, presidents are elected for 4 years, not 3. Right? He's still got a good amount of time left. And Biden's argument was that people should have a say in who gets nominated to the Supreme Court, which I think is true. And since voting has already begun in some states, it's not right for the president and the Senate to elect a social justice, or a Supreme Court justice. They probably shouldn't elect a social justice. That doesn't sound good. It should be done after the election. And one of the things that he cites and why Obamacare came up is because he cites, one of the things on the table is getting rid of Obamacare because Trump's been vocal about it. Get another conservative judge, they'll have a 6-3 majority. It'll be almost impossible to not repeal it. And he's like, 20 million people will be without health insurance. And then the whole I am the Democratic Party and Trump starting his interruptions and stuff started as a result of the Obamacare issue. But I thought that both were not antithesis to each other, and both made good points. Like, you are elected for 4 years. This seems like a natural thing for you to do, is to pick a Supreme Court nominee. And Obama attempted to do this. He just didn't have the Senate, and so the Senate blocked it, which is a power problem in and of itself. But
the hypocrisy
of
that whole thing, and it was Lindsey Graham, recorded that used my words against me, and yet they're not, other than playing that clip every once in a while. And by use my words against me, he was arguing at the time that Obama should not be allowed to add a justice because it was 7 or 8 months till an election or something. It was an election year, months and months away.
Yeah. And so they held it for a long time.
Yeah. So they're going to hold it. And Lindsey Graham, you can find this video, go ahead and look it up on YouTube, is seen saying, after making a case why he should not be allowed to elect a justice to the Supreme Court, that he then says, go ahead and use my words against me. If this comes up again, use my words against me. And sure enough, here we are. And Lindsey Graham is arguing that Trump should be allowed to replace the justice a month out from an election.
Yeah. And it's, like I said, in some states during an election.
Yeah. And it highlights really well. It's a great example of the fact that what politicians say have zero repercussions. You can lie right to the American people. You can say something like, use my words against me. Ooh, that's how you can tell I'm telling the truth. No, because it genuinely doesn't matter.
No, a lot of the time it doesn't. And
there was nothing negative came back except for maybe some memes or some bad tweets on Lindsey Graham for having said that.
Yeah.
Didn't affect his political career whatsoever. So yeah, who cares? Just say the face noises that will get people to do what you want them to do, and then move on.
it's a very interesting situation because of the right leaning skew that it'll create in the Supreme Court. Um, a lot of
For
people,
decades.
yeah. Well, for the nominee, I'm forgetting her full name offhand, but she's like 48.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, if she lives as long as Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she'll be on there for 40 years.
Yeah.
That's a really long fucking time. And you know, we're going to lose a few other Supreme Court justices in the next 5 years because a few of the other ones are in their 80s too. Like they're getting old. So it's possible, but like that creates some legitimate issues. Um, they actually didn't talk a huge amount about Roe v. Wade, which I was curious about. I thought that they would have talked a little bit more about Roe v. Wade. The only thing that really came up is that um, Biden claimed that it's all the other reason he thought it was a problem outside of Obamacare was that because Roe v. Wade is on the docket, is on the Supreme Court docket, something to that. He didn't say docket, but he said it's one. It's it's on their list to review or whatever.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And Trump is like, no, it's not on the ballot. Is what he said. Trump's like, you don't know that. There's been no talk of Roe v. Wade being on the ballot, and that's a big thing from what I understand with the Supreme Court nominee is everyone basically is like scouring through all of her speeches and her policy directives and everything and being like, at what point did she say, if she did, that Roe v. Wade should be overturned? Because that's like the big issue.
Yeah.
Probably a bigger issue, honestly, than Obamacare, I think, for a lot of people. Personally, I think it's a bigger issue, but so that'll
Which to me, it that seems so misguided. It's like, yeah, you can have an abortion, you just can't pay for it. Like,
sure.
where's our priorities here? Or it's honestly to me, and again, the genesis of this podcast is um, all of that takes a backseat to the loss of the republic.
Yes.
Yeah, your laws ain't gonna mean shit
Yep.
if there is no one to enforce them and no courts to rule over them.
Yeah. My big thing, and this is, unless we ever have like a long discussion about Roe v. Wade and abortion rights, my big issue with it's actually really simple for me. I think women should have control over their own reproductive rights. That period. Like I understand. I actually I've looked into a decent amount of the more conservative, like the pro-life view of abortion, and I get it. I understand it completely. Um, I don't think that should violate a woman's right to choose what she does with her body.
Right.
Even if because for me the big issue is I don't think that there are actually that many people out there in the world who actively just think abortion is a good thing. Like
Right.
even pro-choice individuals, I would defy them to be like abortion is great. It's great in as much as it gives women the right to choose.
Right.
That's it. The actual practice is not a good thing. I don't think anyone actually debates that or thinks that that's the case, but no one talks about that. No one is like, this isn't good. It's not something that I think some women are probably going to take advantage of it because some people do that. That's what people do. You're going to find them. There's probably going to be a small amount of them, but there's going to be women who take advantage of this. Most, though, are going to, I would assume, would do this in probably the more dire of circumstances.
Yeah.
And it's like, that should be on them.
I think there's a line to be drawn somewhere.
Sure.
And it's a tough one.
That's
Like
a different conversation.
late
though, right?
term, 8 months, 3 weeks. Yeah, that's too late to have an abortion. You could make the case that if the child is able to survive outside of the womb, maybe. I personally like the idea of at the formation of the prefrontal cortex,
Sure.
because that is what makes us uniquely human. And that is what you could say gives us our own self-awareness and consciousness. At that point, it seems to be a potential place to say that that's now a human being
Sure, yeah.
versus a zygote, a collection of
Yeah.
cells. No, that's silly. But yeah, if you got a prefrontal cortex, that should count for something. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think that's 20 weeks in or something like that. So that's a discussion to be had. But yeah, I definitely agree. A woman should have that choice.
Yeah, and that's really all my like I said, my position is very simple. I think that the discussion is basically what you said. The actual nuanced discussion, I don't think should be a matter of whether or not women can or can't. I think it should be a matter of when.
Yeah.
And that's a legitimate discussion, and that's a hard discussion, right? Because there are going to be situations where women don't find out for a while.
It's true.
And that's actually a problem. But like, and here's the thing, and I'll try and say this delicately if I can, but if we have, there's really not a way to say this delicately. If you have rights, you have to be responsible. That's part and parcel of having rights.
Yeah.
Not only am I responsible for the rights that you carry personally, individually, as a human, I'm responsible for everyone else's rights too. And I'm also responsible for my own rights. That's why, in part, I don't run around and incite violence and beat the shit out of people I don't know and pee in people's cars and light stuff up, like, and do dumb stuff, right?
Not anymore, at least.
Yeah. And so it's like, you don't like people who do that stuff. Why? Because they're irresponsible. That's why you don't like them. You like them because they're assholes. And what are assholes? They're irresponsible because they violate your rights, quote unquote, in whatever way that they do that, whether it's imagined or not. They do inappropriate things that are the things that children would do, which makes them irresponsible. And so I think that if we're going to have legal rights, as women should have, there has to be some amount of responsibility for that. And they already actually bear a lot of responsibility because they get pregnant. And it's a big responsibility. Right.
That's huge. It's life changing.
It is actually life changing.
It's a minimum of the next 18 years of your life.
And you're kind of stuck. And so, but yeah, it's I think having clearly defined limits on that is important for that responsibility, because sometimes you're going to come out on the other side and it's like, well, that's part and parcel of essentially being irresponsible. Right?
Yeah.
You know, and there are going to be cases where that isn't the case. Like, that's partly why I'm trying to not be, super rude. Cause like there's sometimes you just don't know, or there might be an actual reason to do it, to get an abortion outside of whatever time limit people decide to do. But that's an honest discussion that needs to be had. And it'll be a hard discussion. People aren't going to like it on both sides. There's going to be a lot of anger because what's the right thing to do? I don't fucking know. I do know that the wrong thing is to not allow women to make the choice.
Yeah.
That seems self-evident to me. But be that as it may, maybe we should move on from that, and we can talk a lot longer about that later on down the road. Be interesting to get two different guests, like a pro-life or pro-choice guest.
Yeah, and a female perspective.
Yeah, who are willing to be civil.
I'm very aware that we're a couple of dudes talking about this.
Also very true.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just check through my notes here. Trump had a funny joke. At one point, the moderator told him to like let Joe Biden finish, and Joe Biden's like, he never lets anybody finish. And Trump was like, you'd be surprised. Or he's like, he's not good in letting people finish or something like that. And then Trump was like, you'd be surprised. I don't know if he meant it,
Chief, ladies and gentlemen.
I don't know if he meant it inappropriately, but it was amazing.
Oh, he did. He did. He did.
It was hilarious. The debate actually falls apart at 13 minutes in. So the debate is minus the introduction, I think, is 1 hour and 31 minutes, and minus a little bit at the end. It's just over 90 minutes, and it completely falls apart at 13 minutes. I believe 13 minutes is when Biden is like, oh, shut up, man. Like, that was what he said that everyone freaked out about.
Yep.
And
yep.
I believe that was 13 minutes in. If it wasn't, that is around the time where it becomes very clear that Biden is frustrated and frazzled, and Trump has just gotten under his skin. Because after that, it's just a derailment. Everything is just gone.
Honestly, I think that was Trump's only strategy, if you can call it that. I think it was
successful.
Yeah, I think he went into it, and really, it's just him doing his thing. That's just Trump being Trump. So it gave me the impression that he went in to freestyle it. He's not going to look up any facts or any of that stupid bullshit. He had a couple on hand, but the strategy is not to woo the American people on the merits of this platform. It's, I'm going to go dunk on Joe. Watch this.
Yeah.
And he did.
Well, Joe Biden even mentioned it later on. He's like, this is what Trump wants. He wants to disrupt the whole process.
It worked for him in 2016. I don't think it's going to work for him this time, though, but we'll see.
Yeah, we will see. I'm not entirely sure. There's a lot of chatter about the silent majority.
Yeah.
I mean, we live in a very liberal state in a very liberal area
Truth.
where there's not a lot of conservatives, so it's hard for me to say for sure if there's just a large amount of the only conservatives I actually know that are like legitimate conservatives in the area that I live in moved to North Carolina. So
There you go.
so I'm sure there are people that I know that actually are conservative. Um, for those of you listening, even though Dan and I did start a podcast to depolarize political conversations, we don't actually talk about politics all that much outside of the podcast.
No, not really.
In Jiu Jitsu, we don't talk about politics. We mostly just talk about life and how to be better people.
Yeah.
And depending on who's around, we'll talk about Russian literature because it's super interesting. But at least I will. That's what I like to talk about because I read a lot of Russian literature. But mostly we just talk about being human. But yeah, and so I don't know if people are, conservative and don't want to tell anyone because they're nervous. But that seems to be the consensus. So I actually wouldn't be surprised if people we know from the gym are legitimately conservative and just don't say much.
Sure. Well, even if you're not, I mean, the whole defund the police and taking those different stances. I mean, this really is for me beyond red and blue in that these are the things that threaten the republic. That's why I'm concerned. That's why I wanted to do a podcast and talk about this kind of stuff. Baseline politics, I don't really think about them much at all.
No,
yeah, I'm not a political hound like that. But when it comes to fucking the whole thing up, if there is an actual regime change and we are no longer a democratic republic, that scares the shit out of me. So that's got my attention.
You heard Biden come out and directly say that he is against abolishing the police, right?
Yeah, I've heard him make those statements. But what concerns me along those lines is, not so much Joe. I don't think Biden's going to be kind of a milquetoast in office if he gets in. I think,
even though he said he was the Democratic Party.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, he's just an old politician. The younger blood, Kamala Harris, you keep a close eye on her. Anybody that has her ear, and most specifically, any of the people that are actually making changes on behalf of the woke movement, getting curriculums in school changed and things like that. That is way more important than even healthcare in my mind.
Sure.
And so that potentially, and those are the same people that do want to, either extremely defund or actually abolish the police.
Yeah.
None of which is good for anybody.
No, I agree. Very true. And he was like, I do not want to defund the police. And actually, if I remember right, that was the point where my girlfriend, she was like, he's going to lose voters. Right there. It was there might have been another point, but I think that was the one. And I think she's right. Like coming out so staunchly.
Yeah.
On the notion of let's say the woke movement, I'll probably start referring to them as the social justice movement or social justice activists. As what
the woke movement, it's less syllables.
That's true. Yeah, so we could. I'll. They'll be the same. I think synonymous going forward. I use social justice because, broadly speaking, a lot of the theories that we've talked about, critical race theory, critical theory, queer theory, are all apparently now they've all been kind of lumped under social justice theory by actual theorists and the academics who are kind of pushing this to students. And so that's partly why I would do it, is so that in my own head I can keep it with how they use it. So I'm using their terms. So speaking of that, one of the questions that was asked, it looks like it was like question 10, maybe question 11. It was hard to actually get all the questions down because he asked quite a few. Chris Wallace asked, why should voters trust you rather than your opponent to deal with the race issues facing the country over the next 4 years? Now, and I'm going to directly quote what Biden says. And then this reminds me of what you said about the woke movement. It's about equity and equality. It's about decency. It's about the Constitution. And we have never walked away from trying to require equity for everyone, equality for the whole of America. He talked a little bit, and then he went back and he said, we have never accomplished it, but we have never walked away from it like he Trump has. So he does not explain the difference between equity and equality here.
Assuming he even understands what that is.
And assuming
The
he
difference.
means that there's something different.
Yeah.
Like, that's actually part of it. So,
I wouldn't be surprised if he said that because he knows that's the phrasing that people use, but he assumes it means equality.
yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, because I'm using Word document with notes. I'm going to read off the synonyms for equality: fairness, equal opportunity, parity, impartiality, egalitarianism. I'm then going to right click on equity and look at the synonyms: fairness, justice, parity, impartiality, fair play. If memory serves, I think fair play and then whatever the last one was on equality were different. The other four, I think, were the same,
Yeah.
or they were close. So broadly speaking, they roughly mean the same thing. The other big difference, I think, is parity. I don't think parity was a synonym. Yeah. Oh no, it was. Okay. So essentially, according to Word, they're the same word.
Well, see, the problem
Is they're not actually the same word.
well, no, this dictionary that you're using is a white supremacist dictionary. And by definition, they are trying to oppress by using these commonly understood and documented definitions that everybody agrees on just to hold down minority groups.
Sure.
It's all about oppression.
So,
but no,
this is
give
what
them the understood definition, the new definition of equity.
Yeah, and so for listeners and viewers and such, we've gone over this a couple of times, but the actual difference between equity and equality is quite simple to explain. Equality means equality of opportunity. That's it. So there's an equal opportunity, which is partly how our country was designed to be founded. Now, there were obviously problems with how it was founded because it was not an equal opportunity country, but that was the purpose of meritocracy, of liberalism, of free markets, of freedom, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
Equity is equality of outcome. Another way to phrase that actually is parity. And so that gives you an idea of the definition issue here with Word, but because it basically equates both of the words, equality and equity, as the same thing. But or parity, another way to look at it is people are equal across all outcomes, which is actually a problem. Definitely, mathematically, it's a problem.
Yep.
But it's also legitimately a problem because people are different. And so, at what point, where do you stop parity? Because you may ask the question, or someone may think well, racial equity would be good. It'd be good if, whatever what is it, the average black family has like a $1,700 saved up in the bank and is worth $1,700 or $11,000 or whatever, and the average white family is worth $150. It'd be nice if there was some parity there for whatever reason. Maybe that's necessary. Maybe it's not, but let's just say that that's what you want. So, okay, that seems fine. But the problem isn't that we do one thing and then there's apparent equity. The problem is, okay, well, now black and white families have the same amount of net worth monetarily. What else can we create equity with? And then you go down the line and it's okay, well, jobs aren't equal. Well, you may have so you have to figure that part out. Which jobs? And you have to be specific, because is it only quote unquote good jobs? What's a good job? Right? Is a CEO really a good job? Does everyone want to work 80-hour weeks and be responsible for billions of dollars?
I don't.
I mean, I defy you to find a kindergarten teacher who wants to be a CEO.
Right. Yeah.
To pick an example that's probably as far removed from a CEO as probably humanly possible.
Yeah.
It's or what about a bricklayer? Or maybe even more outdoorsy, what about a land surveyor or a logger?
Yeah.
People go into logging in part because they're physical and they like physical jobs, and maybe it's harder to get other jobs, but land surveyors spend 9 months in the woods surveying land for big companies. Land surveyors become land surveyors because they don't like people. At least that's why my uncle became
trees.
Yeah, it's because when my uncle spends 9 months in the woods, and he's been married for 10 years now, and they have a great relationship, probably because they don't see each other. But he also has like 6 sisters, and so I think that's partly why he was, like, scared into the woods by and he's the youngest, and not that women are bad, of course, like, I was raised by women, I love women, but it's that I'm sure that being raised by 6 older women and then having a failed marriage, like, probably he probably didn't like it and was like, "I wanna go live in the woods because I don't like people, I don't wanna be around people." And I know a couple of people who also have been land surveyors, and it's like, they don't really like people. That isn't by and large true, but it's like, they probably don't wanna be a CEO.
Well, at a much lower level, I can't imagine being stuck in a cubicle job.
Yeah.
I don't care how much you pay me.
Well, that's a shit ton of responsibility too. It's like, I think people have this image in their head that like the good job is to have all this power. And it's like, and then you can just kick your feet back and smoke a cigar and, depending whatever your vice is, if you want to bring prostitutes up or if you just want to do a bunch of cocaine and like you can just shovel money and be mean to bums and like whatever it is you see in movies, like all the like the really stupid shit, just fly to wherever you want with your private jet. And it's like most CEOs work 80-hour weeks. They work flat out and they don't see their kids and
Yeah.
they probably don't see their spouses. Like all they do is work because they're driven to work. And it's like, I don't, I think there's very few CEOs where they like do nothing. It's like this misnomer that you just don't do anything. And if you're white and a dude and
Yeah.
marginally intelligent, you just become a CEO. It's like, that's very rare. Trump might actually be one of the only examples of that because it seems to me that that's kind of how it's worked because he's had, family with money who's kind of helped him. But he also, you know, as much as he's failed things, it's actually not easy to start businesses in like 7 different ventures and then attempt to run them and then probably fail all of them so that he doesn't pay taxes,
Yeah.
which is actually kind of hard to do. Like, it's not easy. And I don't want to say too many nice things about Trump because I don't really like him, but it's like, I don't think he's that lazy either. I think he just figure out how to game the system and does as little
Yeah.
work as he needs to game the system. And it's like,
Exactly.
and so it isn't clear to me like the best jobs are like the highest powered ones, but that equity, maybe you want more female engineers. So you start forcing engineers. And what do you do with all the males who wanted to be engineers? Like what jobs are good for engineers? Have you met an engineer? Engineering is about the only job that's good for engineers. My
True.
2 best friends are engineers. I don't know what else they would do. I have no idea. I think they're probably really bad at most other things, but they're really good engineers, and
And it's a valuable
it's
thing
it's
to add
really
to society.
valuable. And it's like, that's how their brains work. And so, but you have to answer that question. Maybe that question's an easy question to answer, or maybe it's a really hard question. So you figure out the good jobs and then you parody them, but you just do it on race or do you do it on gender? And then you have to solidify gender. If gender's not binary, then you really got an issue. How many genders are there? Is it 2? Is it 50? Is it 80? Is it infinite? Because if it's infinite, then you can't actually solve the problem because you have to have infinite gender parity. And I'm getting a little a little off into the weeds there, but like if it's actually infinite, then there is an impossible problem.
Yeah.
So you got to find that number out. What about height? I'm as of like 5 years ago, I am shorter than the average human male in the world, or at least in the U.S. I'm
Vertically challenged.
Yeah, so I'm vertically challenged. So everyone who's 5'10" or greater not only can go fuck themselves, but they have to be shorter. So they have to be shorter. So which part of your body am I cutting off to make you shorter, Dan?
Right.
So because you're taller than me, so that's crap, right? You have more hair than me too, so that's bullshit. So I get to shave off all your hair, or I get to get more hair. So how do you figure that out? Like there's just too many problems, and so I think people believe that whoever decides what equity is will stop. And I see no reason why anyone would want to stop. If you have the power to have equity, why would you give that up? That is like literally the absolute power in the world right now.
Well, I think the reality is we don't want equity in that sense because people are different. If you follow that all the way out to the societal level, you get communism.
Yes.
But that's what that is. But I think that, if we can recognize that people are different, they can have different aims, different goals, different levels of discipline, different levels of ambition.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense to force the outcome, but rather force the opportunity. Everybody gets an opportunity. And I think it's important too to recognize that, yeah, the system has definitely been biased. It has
Yes.
been racist. There's been
Mhm.
gerrymandering and redlining. and Jim Crow laws, and that's all very real, of course. And the results of that have given us a lack of equity, and the results are very skewed. But fixing that does not mean that you take from the people that have more and give it to the people that have less and say, brush off your hands and say, all right, cool, we did it.
Yes.
It's to give everyone the same opportunity and help them as best you can to fix the underserved areas with terrible schools and what do they call it, the school to prison pipeline. Like, those are issues that need to be addressed, but we
Yes.
can't look at it in terms of absolute outcome from the beginning. And it's going to take time. It's going to take several generations for things to really even out. If you give opportunity, now you got to wait a generation or two to see who makes use of that opportunity and how that all shakes out. But otherwise, you're looking at everybody just as a monolith.
Mhm.
Well, you're black, so you are X,
Well,
which
yeah.
is by definition prejudiced. It's prejudging. I
Well,
know everything about you because you're black or you're white.
so here's people don't talk a lot about these kinds of things when it comes to equity, but so here's a couple of examples that I don't know how people are going to solve. So, like 95% of elementary school teachers are women. So, we got to fix that problem. So, it has to be 50-50 roughly. Um, it's kind of always been that way. Women have kind of always been, it's always been like 95% female teachers. So, I wonder if
There's
that
an evolutionary reason for that.
is, yeah, right. But so it maybe actually would be better for society if it was half and half. I don't know. Like, we have a lot of problems with kids complain about a lot of things. They're more diagnosed with things. Everyone's complaining about all the problems we have, and we're learning this all from women. So maybe that's a problem. I'm not saying that it is, but maybe it's a problem. I what is it that Tyler Durden says or Brad Pitt says in Fight Club? He's like, we're a generation of men raised by women. I'm wondering if another
Another
woman is
woman
what
is what we
we need,
need. Yeah.
right? And again, I'm not saying that that's actually true, but it is a question that should be asked, right? Um, like 98% of bricklayers, 99% of bricklayers are men.
Hmm.
That's a really fucking dangerous job. 90% of line cutters, power line cutters are men. 90% of 99% of like concrete layers are men.
Hmm.
99% of loggers are men. So
Coal
coal
miners.
miners. So now all of a
Yeah.
sudden we have to have 50-50 and we get to find women who can do the job. Um, and apparently want to.
Yeah. Exactly.
So that's an issue. What about basketball? Like 80 some odd percent of the NBA is black. Now all of a sudden we have to have less blacks in the NBA, less black people.
Well, no, that's okay
Is it? Because
because
it's not equity though.
that is the underserved population getting their chance to shine, but actually even that is racist because they're owned by a white man
Sure. So
and the whole thing has just got to go.
and so that presents a problem, right? And then there's not enough.
Where's the trans NBA players?
Sure, and there's not enough black individuals in baseball. Um, we need to have, half the quarterbacks have to now be black in the NFL because there's not near as many. Half the skill positions now have to be white because they're mostly black. You get into these problems, and then the biggest problem I see, or one of the bigger problems, is creativity.
How so?
Because creativity is actually extremely rare. Like the number of people who actively do anything creative and produce something, so like they make a record and then it makes money, like it's extremely rare. You want the people that have that ability. You want Elton John to make records.
Right.
But if there are too many white people who make records, then the new Elton John doesn't get to make a record. And then you get to choose someone, black or otherwise, it could be anyone. There's too many black blues artists because blues is generally it's been predominantly black. It's
That is officially
yeah.
a an American black creation.
And so,
Blues music
but you
is.
need
That's
more,
an American
yeah.
phenomenon.
And so now
Yeah.
you need more white people in the blues market.
Shout out to Kenny Wayne Shepherd.
Yeah, I love Kenny Wayne Shepherd. He's actually one of my favorite guitarists. But it's like, what about artists, painters, sculptors, poets, authors? What if you take all the creative people, however that's distributed, and you look for equity and you run out of people to pick? And then you're stuck picking people who just aren't as good, not color or gender wise. They're just not as creative. because that will happen because creativity is very rare. And so, and it's the basketball is the same problem. If you start to change out because it's mostly black and you start putting more white people, like less white people do basketball. So the odds that you're going to replace quality with quality is slim. So you're going to have a bunch of white people who aren't as good playing basketball.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, then it's a problem. It's like,
It's obviously illogical.
yes,
I mean, it look at it for half a second, you can see that, but I think it is.
it's pointing to a problem that needs to be fixed. The issue is that it takes it too far.
Well, I think it's a rhetorical, it's a piece of rhetoric that the woke movement is using in hopes to grab power by forcing resources and opportunities out of the hands of the people that have it now
Yeah.
to the people that they deem are worthy of it. And that's just not the way to go about leveling the playing field.
No, very, very true. But yeah, so Biden said that. He said equity and equality and the Constitution, which I thought altogether in the same paragraph was interesting. But because by and large, people who want equity tend to not believe fundamentally in what the Constitution has to offer. That's kind of part of the ethos of wanting equality of outcome is to dismantle our current Constitution, which is against equality of outcome, and then replace it with equality of outcome. So that was interesting. I think you're right. You mentioned he may not know what it means. That's probably more of what it is. I'm not entirely sure.
The kids are saying equity nowadays, so I'm going to say equity.
And so, but it did worry me as a statement. I did find that I did find that quite worrisome. Let's see what else we got here. There's just so much shit. Oh my God. Oh, Trump.
Good thing we're not live.
Yeah, no, it's
dead air.
Like I said, I'm trying to read through and kind of find out exactly what I want to talk about next. Trump gets asked about whether or not he will condemn white supremacy.
Oh goodness.
So that was
yep.
That was very interesting.
Stand back and stand by.
Yeah, so I actually found this very interesting for a couple of reasons. So the question was, are you willing, Mr. President, tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups and to say that they need to stand down and not add to the violence in a number of these cities? So right after he said the phrase militia groups, Trump said, sure. It's very audible.
Yep.
Once he finished the question, or about as he was finishing it, Trump said, sure, I'm willing to do that. But I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing, not the right wing. At this point, Chris Wallace asked again, and he's like, I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace. And so both Biden and him turned to Trump and they're like, well, say it. Say it. They're like, they want him to say, I denounce white supremacy.
Right.
Even though what he said was basically the same thing.
Right.
And this to me created an interesting conundrum or an interesting problem. And I don't know if Trump is being deliberate about this or not, but all Trump had to do is say, I condemn white supremacy. It's not that fucking hard.
Nope.
That's all he had to do. But at the same time, it was quite clear to me that he was agreeing with the question and was condemning it. Like in a lot of the narrative I've heard is that Trump would not condemn white supremacy. And I don't want to say I disagree with that. It's just that I don't know what it was that Trump was trying to do there.
Because I just don't think he wants to. He doesn't want to lose because anybody made him say anything. It's like, fuck you, I'm not going to say it.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say it.
And that was kind of the problem is it's like, I feel like they weren't really listening to what he said because he's like, sure, like I'm willing to do that. And then they're like, well, then say it. It's like he has to say it. And I'm not entirely sure that he does, but whatever. Maybe he does and he should say it. On the flip side, it shouldn't be that big of a deal. I feel like he was lobbed a softball and he could have just right down the plate and he could have hit it 500 yards out of the park. And instead he like grabbed the ball and then ran away.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're like, what? you're not even playing the same game. Like, just answer the fucking question. Like,
Well, and then to follow up,
because he asked,
stand back and stand by.
yeah, he's like,
The Proud Boys.
yeah, he's like, who is it you're talking about? Who do I
Yeah,
need?
who specifically? Who do I got?
And Biden is the one who said Proud Boys, in particular, and he's like, all right, Biden, Proud Boys, stand down and stand by. I'm not sure why I did stand by. I actually don't really.
That's the whole thing right there. And whether that was just Trump struggling for words, but there has been myriad T-shirts printed from admittedly white supremacist organizations.
From the Proud Boys, from what I understand.
From the Proud Boys that say that.
Yeah.
Stand back and stand by. And they are taking that as an acknowledgement and an endorsement of their organization.
No,
I don't know if Trump thinks that's good for his votes or something, or like I said, just doesn't want to out and out denounce anyone because that will mean he lost that little pissing contest with Biden. I don't know, but none of it's good.
No.
At best, it's not good.
No, and it's like like I said, I found it very interesting, and I don't know what the meaning of it is because it's like he did say some things that were about the same as denouncing white supremacy, but he didn't say it. And it was an easy thing to say. And it's like, why don't you just fucking say it, man?
Yeah.
Like, it's not that hard.
I don't want to.
Yeah. And it's like, if you believe it, just say the damn thing.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't an agenda thing. It's just people, by and large, or 95%, probably 97% of the population, maybe even 99, are going to denounce white supremacy because they don't like it. It's a fringe group of people.
Exactly.
And it's like, you really miss that. To counter that, Joe Biden did not very clearly endorse the Black Lives Matter movement, which I thought was very interesting. So I'm going to find that in my notes here.
I may go back and watch it just for that then, because that has a lot more nuance to it.
So here's what it was. What does reimagining policing mean? And do you, Biden, support the Black Lives Matter call for community control and policing? So I take that back. Let me rephrase that. It was less the Black Lives Matter movement itself, but it's their call for community policing.
Gotcha.
Which is, I think there's an argument to be made that it's kind of one and the same. The Black Lives Matter call for policing has been the call of defund the police. That's been the call. And of the two, he's the one who's going to try or has tried or will try to get the Black Lives Matter vote.
Right. Yep.
I don't think Trump cares to, nor would he.
No.
But that's when, he talked about his stance on controlling the police. He actually said, "I am totally opposed to defunding the police officers. They need more assistance. They need, when they show up for a 911 call, to have someone with them who is a psychologist or a psychiatrist to keep them from having to use force and being able to talk them down."
I agree with this.
And that's verbatim. What I take issue with is the phrase, having to use force.
What do you take issue with? What part of that?
It isn't clear to me that first off, that police should ever have to use force, but more so than that, it's not clear to me that his supporters would agree that police should ever have to use force. Versus
somebody pulls a gun on a cop.
Yes, but a psychologist shouldn't be there if there's a gun involved, right? And so that's part of it. Is he like my thought is that he's referring to those situations when a psychologist or psychiatrist would be needed to like de-escalate the situation, maybe because someone's having a mental break, and then the police then use force to subdue the individual. But I'm drawing a distinction between having to use force and using it because it's a tool that's available. Having to implies that they're kind of forced to do it because of the circumstance. And it's not entirely clear to me that the Joe Biden supporters would want police to be forced to use force and should be forced to use it, and then also should be forced to use it if a psychologist would be called there and would be better utilized in that situation. Does that make sense? There's a disconnect there. I think the words could have been said better.
I think it's, well, of course, but I think that I don't necessarily disagree with that statement that he made because there you can't analyze it from the assumption that you have all the information of what's happening. Meaning, they get a
Yes.
call and, oh, okay, this is mental health, so just send out the counselor, and
Sure.
we'll send one cop and they'll stand by. Oh crap, we didn't know they had a gun. How did that happen?
Yeah.
Where'd they get a gun? Or or a knife or something like that. So there's so many variables and so many unknowns that cops never know exactly what they're getting themselves
No, of
into.
course.
So, having to use force, yeah, I think there is absolutely a point where a cop is going to have to use force.
Yes.
When they feel they need to use force and where they could be trained to handle without, definitely without deadly force.
Yes.
But I think that can be improved on greatly. But yeah, I think there's definitely a line to be drawn that, oh yeah,
And that
force will be
it's
necessary.
the difference between having to and needing to. And that's the distinction I want to make, I think. Like you were saying,
Go on.
like if they have to use force versus them needing to use it because of a situation.
What's the difference?
So the difference would be maybe they feel like they have to use force because there's no other alternative versus having it available as a tool that they can use if they need to, but they don't actually have to need to. Like, and maybe I'm not explaining this properly. One of them seems to me, like I said, that they're using force is the option, period. Like there's a call, force is going to be needed. Even if they don't know it, we're going to use force. Versus force is one of a bunch of tools that we could use that we would like to not have to use. It should be a last resort, which I think is
Okay.
the line that his supporters in particular are taking. It's like, and a line a lot of people probably should take is we want less police brutality.
Yeah, I think that's the common understanding.
And
Not to say
so
that some people might take it otherwise, but I think in the departments of in politics, that having to and needing to are synonymous. It's not like you have to, like your boss says you have to
yeah,
go beat somebody up. It's you have to because if you don't, you're going to die, which would be the same as you need to.
but it's not always the same, I don't think. And let me think some more on this so I can better articulate that. But there is a difference between having to and needing to do something.
I think in terms of policy, they are the same.
Yes.
And ultimately, I mean, it all comes back to policy because we're independent, free individuals. So we write things down. We call them laws. You have to do this. If you choose as an individual person to be a police officer, you got to follow these extra laws and rules that we lay down. But it all comes down to rather than necessarily an individual judgment call,
Yeah.
it's the policy of um, if you assess that your life is in danger as
Sure.
a police officer, use force, or whatever, But they go over that and they define it very clearly.
No,
Um,
they do it. I just, like I said, the issue that I took with it is how he worded that whole thing.
hmm,
I'm fine with the notion of having, a mental health professional go on calls where a mental health professional will be best equipped to handle those calls so that cops don't use force when something else would be better to do.
yeah,
The problem I have is the assumption that a psychologist would go to prevent cops from having to use force as if they somehow actually have to. Like it, because it isn't always clear to me that they will have to use force.
right.
That's what I'm having trouble
Okay,
with. Is it's like, it, in what situation would cops have to use force and psychologists would not? Maybe that's a
okay.
better.
So
Maybe that's a
here's
better question.
okay. Here's hypothetical. There's a call that a woman's son is having an episode of some sort.
Sure.
We do know that he has some mental challenges, may or may not be on his meds, but it's a sketchy situation, and mom doesn't feel safe right now, so she calls cops. Um, and scenario one, two officers show up, just two officers, and they are trying to talk to somebody who needs special attention to the way they're communicated with
Yes.
for whatever reason. And the normal procedures, whereas maybe, if you turn around and walk away from a police officer, they're going to grab your arm and say, you don't walk away from a police officer. We're talking to you.
Yeah.
This is a lawful stop or whatever. And then grab your arm and turn you around, not knowing that this person may freak directly the fuck out when people touch them.
Yes.
Maybe they're just like, don't touch,
Mhm.
and just freak out and they start swinging on the cop. Well, yeah, now a cop has to defend themselves. Versus showing up an officer and a counselor that says, okay, hang back. I'm going to talk with this person. Hey, how you doing? And they know how in a much gentler tone
Yep.
to get this information out and maybe they can resolve the situation more calmly. I think that's a scenario that it would be beneficial
Yeah, correct.
and it would keep a police officer from having to because doing the normal things that they do in society where they'll grab you or something if that may trigger this person for whatever reason but a trained counselor would know how to navigate that scenario that could be the difference. That's a
Sure.
hypothetical off the top of my head.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was thinking is that I know that there was the case of I believe it was a young man who I think he might have been autistic, but he was four cops came to a woman called four cops came to the house and they ended up like corralling him in the bathroom and holding him down and he like died. I don't know why there was four cops, but like that's the example in my head where it's like some kinds of quote unquote force, like maybe grabbing the arm and turning him around is necessary because you have to have, be communicating with somebody. And that's how cops are trained. And they can't not do some of those things because then they just get shot. That's a problem, right? Um, but there is, a big thing that people talk about is the line between doing those subtle uses of force, let's say, and then like the egregious uses of force. And it's like those egregious things don't actually have to be used. I think that they're used because people don't know, cops don't necessarily know what to do. And so they feel like it's something that has to be done, but it's an issue of training. We talk about that. And so,
Well, if you don't have the training and that's your only option, if that's
right,
your last and final option, then you have to.
right. And so,
You
but
need more training.
that's kind of the difference I see between having to do something because of lack of training and then needing to do it. I don't see needing to do it as the same thing there. I see needing to do it because you've exhausted every other option that is available, period. But every option has not been exhausted for cops because there are other things that people could do, and that's what policy is trying to change. That's my point. Is that the other options that could be done is, I mean, they could theoretically just walk away. That could be problematic, but they could actually get better training, or we could have psychologists that actually come. Like things aren't actually being done that require that. And so that's what I take. And I know I'm harping on this a lot. It's just that a lot of what our politicians say, like you were saying earlier, like there's no repercussions for it. And so they're not really careful with their words. And then they say shit like equity and equality, or they say the phrase that Biden just said, and then they use interesting words. Like
Yeah.
there's like this force to use force. And like I don't see that. It doesn't seem to me that cops should be forced to use force in situations. That's a problem for me because they shouldn't be forced. And phrasing it as having to use force implies to me that there is like they're forced to do it. Like there's no other alternative, and it's like that's wrong. There should be other alternatives, and that's part of why we want to fix this stuff. But in him saying that there's currently no other alternative strikes me as actually wrong. Like I don't think he understands the problem. Maybe that's a better way to put it too. Like it's just poor word choice.
Yeah.
That's really the thing. And I know, like I said, I know I'm getting hung up on this, and I'm going to think on it some more. And we'll probably talk about this in our next podcast as I get it more clear in my head. But the word usage there, I thought was very poor, and I thought he could have, in what seemed to me to be like the biggest question for him of the night was this. This seemed to me like to be like the crux of him in the debate. He should have had this answer down, and I think he could have chosen way better words to describe what it is he wanted to do.
Hmm.
And instead, he used the words that he used in a way that makes me question how he feels about the actual use of force.
My guess is most people would take that as synonymous.
Sure.
Need to and have to. I mean, I get your point. I don't know that most other
I
people
doubt it. Yeah,
would
it's
take it to that degree, but I do see what you're saying.
maybe it's more of the way he phrases it makes me feel that he believes it's the use of force is justified. I'll think more because that could actually be what it is. That
Sometimes it is.
sometimes it is, but not all the time. And so
Mm.
that I think that might be part of it is that it strikes me as him saying, well, use of force is justified. And so we want psychologists so that like, we don't have justifiable violence. And I'm gonna have to think some more on that too. But whatever the case, I thought he answered the question very poorly. Um,
He answered a lot of the questions very
They
poorly.
both, yeah, they both really did. Let's go back to another question here. Chris asked Trump about racial sensitivity training, and then he asked him if he believed there was systemic racism in America, which was the latter part Trump never answered.
Hmm.
Biden had some interesting responses to what Trump said. Trump said he ended it because it was racist and that it was teaching people to hate the country, to which Biden responded that no one's doing that, and that he knew more about racial sensitivity training than Trump did. And I don't know if he actually does or if this is just like a pissing contest. Like the
Yeah.
whole night, like very shortly after that exchange, Trump, I think he'd like talked a little bit about like crime in suburbs and stuff. And Biden claimed that he knew suburbs better than Trump, and then also claimed, and like that fucking matters. But then he also claimed that suburbs are by and large integrated, which I don't believe is actually true. I don't know if that's actually factually correct.
Yeah, I don't know either. It's a good question.
I didn't write down his quote afterwards, but he had like a really awkward quote about how in the suburbs that like in the vans like going to like soccer and stuff, there are, how did he phrase it? I wish I would have written it down. It was really confusing, and so every time I kept like rewinding to hear him say it, like I couldn't keep all the words in my head because it was jumbled. But he basically was like, he sees a lot of soccer mom vans with like white and brown and black and Asian kids in them. Like it's very interracial. It was just a really weird statement.
And by a lot, he means two.
And I'm just like, for my understanding of suburbs was that it was a mass exodus from gentrified cities by white people because blacks and browns were moving to cities. And so the whites had money and they moved out of the cities.
No, well,
that's what I thought suburbs were.
Kind of, sort of. I mean, yeah, it's just the outskirts because it's cheaper.
Yeah.
And there are, there's good neighborhoods in the suburbs and there's bad neighborhoods in the suburbs type of thing.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's just a result of property value when a lot of people come into a city to do stuff. And since there's more people, the property goes up and some people aren't going to be able to afford it. But I don't know how diverse the suburbs are on the whole. I think it's going to depend really on where the hell
you're
are.
at.
Yeah.
The other thing I thought Biden said that was interesting was that he said that the reason that suburbs are in trouble, because Trump's argument was a lack of law and order. Biden said that the reason suburbs are in trouble is not because of a lack of law and order, but because of Trump's handling of COVID.
I would agree with that more than the law and order. The law and order thing, that's such a recent phenomenon since George Floyd. I mean, the real hard push for that, because we've seen rioting in the streets, and that is a problem, and that can't be allowed to continue the way that it has.
Yes.
But the deep problems that we need to be addressing go way farther back than George Floyd and nightly riots or any of that. So
no, they do.
Yeah, that kind of kills the law and order argument.
One thing, another funny joke that came up, or Trump had a couple of good singers, and they're still talking about law enforcement, law and order and stuff. And Joe Biden's like, I'm for law and order, and I'm not for, I'm for police officers, that kind of thing, and not for defunding them and all that. And Trump said, "Name one law enforcement group that supports you. Don't worry, we have time."
Ooh. All right. That's solid.
It was a good one. It was solid. A good one.
Yeah.
There was just some burns.
No, I think it would be very easy to objectively prove that more people have suffered and been harmed as a result of what's happened with COVID in this country versus the George Floyd riots.
Yeah.
That's some pretty easy math to do.
Yeah, it's pretty easy numbers.
Yeah. And it's because violence is so sensationalized.
Yeah.
It's easy to eat up the news cycle, but the reality, I mean, it's, you don't want to, if you don't want to experience violence in the riots, don't go to the riots.
Yeah.
It really comes down to that. Unless you happen to be stuck somewhere where your condo is above the chop or something, and you unfortunately have to deal with that. But for the vast majority of everybody, that's a video on your computer or on your phone that you're watching.
Yeah.
It's not a direct threat to you, but everybody's affected by COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So the last thing that I'd thought of to go over, and this will kind of tie it back into what we first talked about, or what I had first mentioned about how like I wasn't convinced that either of them were really in it. Like they neither were believable. Trump was believable in as much as I expected him to be an asshole and to be a 2-year-old, but I didn't really think he wanted to be there. And I didn't really see anything from Biden that told me that like he actually cared. Um, there was a point where Trump kind of goes off a bit talking about I believe he's talking about Hunter Biden, Joe's son, the one who was embroiled in like the Ukrainian scandal stuff
Hmm.
with money and getting money from a mayor of China or mayor of Russia or whatever. I didn't really look into it, but there was some issues.
Yeah.
And he's like talking about it, and then he talks about how Hunter was dishonorably discharged from the military and was recovering because he's a drug addict and like all this. He's just kind of picking on his kids, and you can see Biden getting a little hot under the collar about it. And um, as Trump's talking, Biden really starts to get angry, and it's the only time in the debate where you actually see Biden like come alive, like his passion kind of. He like points at Trump and he's like, "Now look here, man!" Like he's talking about his son Beau. He's like, the military is, people in the military are not a joke or something like that. Like, my son is a good man. Like, and he kind of like because he thought, I think, to a degree that Trump was kind of calling his son, calling his son names, and his son had died, and he it was the first honest reaction that I remember seeing from him in the debate. The rest of it just seemed very mechanical and sort of this is how it's supposed to go. And then he kind of gets a little hot under the collar and he's like he kind of turns to him and points a finger. And I remember like at the time, both times I watched the debate, I kind of like felt my hackles raise a little bit in the back of my neck, like little
It's
hairs.
on.
And I was like, oh, like he feels something. Like that was, and it kind of simmered down a bit. And um but it was interesting because up until that point, I still didn't feel like Joe Biden was really into it. And then this just was like in such stark contrast to like the rest of the debate that I was like, why is he here? Like this just solidified for me that I didn't think he really cared to be there. Not that he necessarily didn't want to, but that he didn't really I didn't really see it didn't seem to me like he cared to be there to do this. And maybe he
Not
didn't.
surprising.
Maybe he was like, I don't really want to debate Trump.
Well, he's quote unquote hiding in the basement forever. I mean,
Yeah.
like the truth is, neither of them are leaders. This is a fucking reality show. They're playing this politics game. To expect
Hmm.
leadership behavior from either of these two is entirely misplaced.
Yeah.
So if you find the reality show entertaining, then dive on in. But to expect leadership out of it, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. And it was sad of me. It was sad to see though. Like I'm not suggesting that the whole debate, Biden should have been that emotionally charged. That might actually physically give him a heart attack because of his age and health issues. Like it's hard to maintain that kind of like
Sure, yeah.
emotional that passion. It also probably make him sound highly irrational through a lot of that because it's hard to sound rational when you're that passionate about something.
Which is the idea of making personal attacks on somebody.
Right, exactly.
Get
And
him to break.
I think that's kind of what Trump was going for, and it
Yeah.
worked. And like I said, I think that's why he won is because he was successful what he was attempting to do. But um, I I believe that there 100% that there are ways that he could have been more engaged with the debate and less engaged with Trump.
It's tough when he keeps talking over you.
It is, and it's hard. But it's like I expected Trump to be a 2-year-old. I don't think anyone expected Trump to have manners. I don't even think Biden expected Trump to have manners. And so like it's one of those situations where it's like, do you really get upset at your child when they knock over spilled milk? They knock over milk you put on the corner of a table. You're the one who put it where they could reach it, and they're a kid. Like of course they're going to hit it. It's like at what point do you draw the line and say like, do I have a reason to be angry? This is my expectation of this child president.
You draw the line when he's got the nuclear codes.
I mean, to a degree, yes, but at the same time, like they people, a lot of people, mostly people who were against him in the political sphere, they treat him this way, and they're like, oh, this is just Trump being an ass. Like they don't treat him any differently any other time. So it's like, why would they do it now?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I basically, I guess what I'm saying is I expected Trump to do what he did, and I hoped that Biden would have shown more restraint and been more composed and not allowed him to get Trump to get under his skin.
It's a tall order, man.
It is like
Personally, I expected about 30% of that. I knew Trump would be Trump and do his thing, but like you had texted me and said, "Oh, I watched the debate and it was a shit show." I was like, "Yeah, I figured." But then I actually watched part of it and saw some of the highlights. It's like, holy fuck, it was really that bad. And then I was embarrassed for the country. Like, damn. And I wouldn't have been able to keep my cool, but I'm not a politician either. But yeah, the whole thing, it was embarrassing.
No, it was, and it's like the actual winner is every leader of every country who doesn't like America. Like that's actually the winner. Like I say
100%.
Trump won because he had an agenda, I assume, and then he actually succeeded at that agenda. So that by default, I think, makes him the winner in a shit show like this. But
Putin loved it, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure every leader who doesn't like this country or wants something bad to happen to it or whatever is like, this was the best fucking debate ever. And it's like, that's where we're at. And it's like, people are questioning whether they should continue to do debates now, or if the format should be changed. And maybe the format should be changed, but it's like,
be able to mute mics and stuff like that. Yeah.
We just had a couple of 70-year-old men who in the last 15 years have both paid over $300,000 in taxes in a year. Like there's been some years where Trump's paid a couple million in taxes. Biden paid like 300 and some odd thousand.
There were also years he paid, 2016, $750.
Sure. My point is that these...
Bitch, I paid more than that.
I know. My point though is that they're both like absurdly wealthy people.
Yeah.
And they're really fucking old.
Yep.
And they produced a catastrophe so epic in proportion that the actual thing that they did might just get canceled forever.
I know, it wouldn't be forever. This is a special thing.
Maybe just for now.
Trump, man.
And it's like, come on.
And can you imagine? I mean, if we lift ourselves up out of 2020, because this is skewed everyone's vision, the new normal and all that. But let's jump forward a few years and look back on this crazy time. And if we can, if we think that the presidential debates got so hectic that there was a debate when they muted the microphone of the president of the United States of America so he wouldn't interrupt.
Yeah.
Dude, if that happens,
so
I don't even know.
I'll close my end with this statement here.
Okay.
And then if you have anything to say, you can go ahead and say it. But one of the things I thought was interesting is that a lot of people gave the moderator crap on both sides. He got shit from the left and the right. And, he didn't do enough or didn't ask tough enough questions, or he wasn't tough enough or whatever. And it's like, I actually agree with a lot of it. Like his questions were bad. They could have been way tougher. But here's the thing is that how do you, as a moderator, look the leader of the free world in the eye and say, "Sir, shut the fuck up"?
He tried.
But what is he supposed to? He did most everything short of that. Like, "Sir, please be quiet." "Sir, like I'm trying to talk." Like you're talking over. And it's like, at what point do you pop the kid in the mouth to get him to stop talking? Like, I'm seriously. Or what point do you spank your kid?
At no point if the president. I mean,
and that's
realistically,
my point. That's my point. It's like, what was he supposed to do? He needed a gavel.
Yeah.
Or a super soaker. He actually needed a super soaker. That would have been better. It would have been funnier if he like
shot him on the nose with a newspaper.
No, he just like shot Trump with the super soaker with water. I need to be very clear. Can we air this now? Like it's filled with water.
Dude, just get him in the hair.
Yeah, you just
soak,
shoot
that mop down.
Because he's like 20 feet away. So those things, they can shoot pretty far. So you just shoot him with water, like just like kind of jerk him out of his whatever he's talking about. So he'll shut up and then and then he does the same to Biden too, to make it equal and stuff. Because of equality. And
I can see the orange streaks running down his face now.
But it's like, what do people expect him to do? Like even if he wanted to be tougher, at some point he has to draw a line, because God knows what the president of the United States of America is going to do to him if he's like, let's say if it's Obama and Obama was getting a little feisty and he's talking and, the moderator's like, Mr. President, Mr. Obama, please shut the hell up. Like, I'm sure Obama's not gonna be happy about that. He's probably afterwards like, what the fuck that guy say to me?
Oh yeah, he's fired all kinds
he's a speed dial the IRS.
Done.
Like, you need to look up his tax. Like, just make his life, or whatever. I don't know. But it's like, you can't he can't realistically like do anything other than just keep saying the same shit over and over. Like, you need to stop talking. Like, you agreed on the rules. Like, be quiet, be quiet.
Yeah.
It's like
No,
at some point, like, when do you hit him?
it's an untenable situation. He did the best he could.
Yeah,
I got no gripes with
I don't
with
even agree
Chris
how
there.
he handled the talking. Like I said, my biggest gripe with him is I don't like the questions. The questions could have been better.
Sure.
There were too many questions where it was like, why should voters vote for you over you? And it's like, all that's going to
Well,
do is just fuel this. Well, I'm better than you.
I
You're
don't think
wrong. I'm
better. I
right.
don't think better questions would have helped in this circumstance.
No, but I would have felt better about the debate had he just asked better questions, even if
I think it would have been the same shit show.
yeah, I think it would have too. I just
Yeah.
would have liked the questions better. So I would have felt better about the debate. That's what I mean. Is like, if you were to give me this debate and then a debate where the questions are better, I'd be like, I like that debate better.
Fair enough.
Just
Okay.
because the moderator at least asked more intelligent questions
Right. He
that
tried.
I felt had more substance. And then I'm like, you know what? At least you did your job.
Yeah. All right.
At least you did your full job,
Yeah.
in answering good questions, because he came up with them on his own. And it's like, so he said. And so I'm like, ask better questions. Like, like one of the questions was looking at both of your records. Why should voters elect you over your opponent?
Can you imagine if it was Rogan?
Fuck.
Mr. President, don't make me hip toss you.
So I actually brought this up to my girlfriend. I was like, you know what they should have done? They should have allowed him to grapple. That should be part of the debate rules, is that the debaters have to grapple. That's actually part of it. Maybe it's 30 minutes in, it's part of the break. It doesn't matter. Or maybe after every question, they have to grapple, and whoever gets submitted goes second
There you go. Yeah.
or something, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like, you just see a bunch of just two old fucks like trying to choke each other. And one of them dies by the end of it because they're both
Oh.
old and unhealthy.
That'd be so terrible.
Yeah, it would be, but they wouldn't talk as much. They'd be out of breath.
Then I can see Putin just sitting in the background going, yeah.
Also, he's a judo black belt.
He's legit. Yeah.
I've actually seen some videos of him.
Yeah.
He's got some legit form. Whether
Oh,
or
yeah.
not his training partners are letting him throw him or not, he's still got good form.
He's doing the right techniques. You can tell
so-
that he actually knows it. Whether or not he's super polished right now, but he's trained for real.
I did see a video where he was throwing a guy, practicing and throwing a guy a couple times, and then like the video ended shortly after the other guy like tossed him, and then
It was never heard from again.
That's the thing, is like, I don't know if the editor edited it like that on purpose just to mess with people listening, but I feel like he was like, if I cut it right as soon as Putin falls, everyone's gonna think this guy was murdered for throwing Putin.
The editor's like, I'm not allowed to show the KGB, and it was all KGB.
They're just
after
like
that.
coming down from
Yeah.
the ceiling, but I would not be all surprised if like judo in particular and sambo both are like they're big culturally in Russia, and so I wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised if he goes into places and people might pull a little bit and maybe not throw as hard as they can because it's it's the president of Russia, but
He's an older guy. I mean,
yeah, he's in his 60s or 70s
Yeah.
too, but I'm sure like he gets his lumps. I'm sure guys come in there and like, well, I can't do the move on you if you don't let me throw you. So like,
Yeah.
So he's like, okay, well,
he's a physical Russian man. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just you look at you without riding with no shirt on a horse, and
sport's really big. It's a
he
big
does
part of
manly
it.
shit.
It's like I said, in particular, judo and sambo and wrestling, of course, the very physical sports. They're very popular in Russia, and so that'd be kind of fun to watch. I would grapple Putin.
Hell yeah.
He's on my list of.
Assuming my life wasn't on the line,
Yeah.
I'd
I probably, assuming my life was on the line, I would have to assume that like I've somehow been kidnapped and like a prisoner in Russia for some reason. So if they're
Okay,
like,
okay.
before you die, what's your like last request? Like, I want to grapple Putin. Like,
Make a Wish Foundation.
yeah, it's
Look it
like,
up.
if I'm going to die anyways, like, can I grapple you? It has to be submissions. Like, I don't, I'm not just going to let you throw me and then I get killed. It's like, I at least going to try and heel hook the shit out of you. Like, if nothing else, like I'm going to try and like break your arm or something. Like, fuck, I'm going to die as you're choked out, like whatever. But he's on my list of quote unquote celebrities that I would like to grapple. Like, for someone who's
Sure.
well known,
Yeah.
I would totally, even if in his age, he still just fucked me up because his judo's good. Like, I'd still be fine with it. It'd be a lot of fun.
That'd be a good experience. Yeah.
Definitely. We should probably end on that.
Yeah,
note.
I think that's a good note. to
End on a
it.
happy note.
That's right. Yeah.
Heel hooking Putin. We can't air this, can we? This
Sure we can.
This will get us in trouble, right?
Still America. For at least another couple months.
Right. Yeah. So that was the debate. and it was a shit show.
Crazy. So crazy, we didn't even really talk about Trump having COVID. We'll talk about that next time.
Oh yeah, that's like not even the most important thing.
Unbelievable. All right, folks. Well, there you have it. There's another episode of Beyond Red and Blue. I'm Dan Humphrey. That's Beau Richards over there. And we hope you have a wonderful day, night, or morning, whichever applies to you.
Peace, everybody.